Thank you for watching BlaXit. Please subscribe to our channel BlaXit, smash that like button and share everywhere.
Many of the honourable members don't know much about me. I know slightly more than them. I'm a former intelligence officer and I like to find out about who I'm speaking to. But let me say a few words about myself. I was born in the UK, London precisely, from parents from St. Lucia. Now many of you don't even know where St. Lucia is, but I'm going to explain to you something about St. Lucia today. I've spent over 35 years as a policing and security specialist. Yeah, I'm a professor, but I spend most of my time in the field. There are two types of professors. Those who never leave the library, and those of us who are experienced, who retire, then we teach. So I'm a proper security professional, as I would say. I'm a founding member of a security and safety group for economic development, which involves brothers like PAR and other members of the gambling police service and private security sector, because we know it's important to address the issue of security and safety, which is intrinsically linked to economic development. You can't make money unless people feel safe. You don't put your money in a bank if the bank's security systems are poor. So before we start talking about investment on a serious level, we need to look at security and safety of people's investments, their assets, etc., etc., etc. So I'm working together with a group of brothers from the various branches of the services and former officers, such as PAR, that you're going to be an asset to the developing country. Dr. Salam made this clear. You come here, you find out you're living around poor people. Do you have the right values, the skills, and the mentality to adjust to that situation? So I will come back to this in terms of understanding the diaspora later on. Next slide, please. So my task today is to talk about African displacement. In other words, where are our people? Where do they find themselves? Etc. But me, being the kind of person I am, I always like to put my own seasoning in the food. So I want to develop on that, to talk about where our people are geographically, because there are many people in here who may not be aware where African people are. Yeah? Who your potential allies are. If we teach international relations, we tend to do it from a Western perspective. America, China, but not a Pan-African perspective that where are our people in those places? So I want to give you both. History of resistance and a tradition of exemplary leadership. Why is that important? Because there are people with values and beliefs and skills which are more beneficial to the development process than others. So when Dr. Salah says we need a certain type of person to come to Africa, I totally agree. And others not to come to Africa. You come on holiday and you go home. Because they don't have the values, the skills, and the mentality. And I want to talk about super and overachievement. I will not talk about discrimination or disadvantage, because that is only one page of the African story. My great-grandfather was very, very successful, as was my grandfather and father. So one side of the diasporan story is of the African success. In 1930s, the book The Philadelphia Negro, written by W.E. Du Bois, was voted as the greatest piece of scholarship at the time by the American Association of Sociologists. Why? The book details the experience of people in Philadelphia from 1860. Blacks in Philadelphia made more progress than white people within one generation. Yeah? There are more black schools in Philadelphia than any place. More rich black people in Philadelphia. And the book studies how people came from slavery with nothing to rise to middle class, upper middle class, superior positions. And why I mention that book Because the same thing in the Caribbean. Look at many of the big families, the rich families. Where did they come from? They were slaves. My great ancestors were slaves, but they're very successful people. So I want to talk about a certain section of the diasporan population. I don't want to talk about white people, racism, they don't like, yes, we know this. And finally, I want to talk about diasporan organizations and their role in a development strategy. DJ? Thank you. Okay, a quick geography lesson. Here is Africa, which we all know. The majority of our ancestors were taken from West Africa to go to the New World, predominantly the United States of America. In order to get there, we have to pass through the Caribbean. As previous speakers have said, the Caribbean was a major point of debarkation and processing of the slaves. As a consequence, many Africans are found in the Americas, Brazil, Colombia, Argentina. These were Africans on the way either from the Caribbean who ended up elsewhere. We have Africans as far as Japan, which I will show you later. This is about the individual histories. Remember, Africans were separated. So you may be in the US where you're amongst millions of Africans, or you could be in a place where you're there by yourself and you end up in East Germany. There are African slaves in Russia. Because a rich person in Russia could have been in France, bought a slave and took him to Russia. And the story of those people is horrific because you're by yourself in China. You're by yourself in Japan. And there are books that tell the stories of these brothers and sisters. Next slide, please. Here we have a map of my beloved region. Here is Jamaica, where Sister Juliet's people are from. Here is St. Lucia, where I can't see, where is St. Lucia? There it is, an island of 170,000 people. But as my father used to boast, it's not the numbers, it's the quality. St. Lucia has 3 Nobel Prize winners in a population of 120,000 at the time. 90% of the people could not read and write. So you think about that performance level. 3 Nobel Prize winners, and the majority of people cannot read and write. So that is part of our heritage, our resource. Honduras, Nicaragua, all these places, Colombia, Africans. And these are people on their way to the Caribbean who are either got diverted, etc. So our people all around the world. Next. Here is a picture of the Battle of Monrepo, which is our people there in St. Lucia, Africans in St. Lucia, fighting the French. Next slide. Next slide. Here we have Africans in Mexico. I bet you most people don't know the first president of Mexico was an African slave. There he is. Vicente Guerrero, who ended slavery. Remember, white people will tell us one story, they ended slavery. No. We killed so many of them in the Caribbean, they realized this is not going to work. Yeah? Because we do not fear you. So slavery ended for 2 reasons. One, it was no longer economically viable, and the security apparatus to maintain it was too expensive. In Trinidad, Jamaica, our people was burning down the cane fields. So if you kill our brother here, or they torture him, the rest of the Africans will burn the place down. You can't kill all of us. So slavery became inviable economically. Next, so here we have Africans in Brazil. Can anybody tell me who this man is? Famous king, African slave turned king in Brazil. Ganga Zuma. At least somebody can read. Remember, almost 50 million Africans were taken to Brazil, of which the population now is about 27 million. Okay? And anthropologists have worked out the majority of Africans in Brazil are Yoruba Nigerians. and the Congo. Right? If you listen to how they talk, how they dance, how they eat, connection is very strong. So here we have Africans in Brazil. Not just any Africans, but Africans who were skillful, brave enough, resourceful enough to defeat their enemies and become kings. And here's another one. Martin Delaney, the father of black nationalism in North America. Look at him, a physician. Do you know how hard it is to be a doctor in the 1830s? He was a doctor. He was a military officer of rank, a major. So you can see the kinds of people who we produced in the diaspora. Even in extreme times, such outstanding. To be a doctor now, you have to be someone. Medicine is not an easy profession. But can you imagine in the 1830s? Yeah? Move on. Who's this? One of the greatest leaders in black America. He spoke Mandinka. He was a Gambian. Henry Highland Garnet Sr. Escaped from slavery 3 times. Killed. One of the reasons he was my hero, because the amount of white people he killed, he was ruthless. Yeah? He was a Gambian. Africans in Japan. One of the most famous warriors, samurai warriors. Here he is, Yasuke. About 7 foot. Yeah? He's one of the most revered samurais. You know the samurais of the elite military class? Well, he's one of the gods of the samurai. He's an African from East Africa. Remember, the majority of Africans who was enslaved came from West Africa. But here you have an East African in Japan. Next slide, please. And there he is again. Next slide. France, General Alexander Dumas. Remember, 10 of Napoleon's greatest generals were African. Dumas is one of them. Okay? He's also the author of the 4 Musketeers. So not only he was a great general, he's a great scholar, a great intellectual. There he is. Next slide, please. Okay. I want to talk about super achievement. What do I mean by super achievement? Dr. Bernard Cord, who's a very famous Pan-Africanist and educationist, wrote a book in 1972 called How the British Education System Fails West Indian Children. And the reason he wrote the book was this. All the research found that immigrant children outperform white students. Between the age of 4 to 11, they destroyed them. But when they reach a certain age, then the performance starts to change. But he was the first to notice that immigrant black children were better students than white people. That's not a surprise to me. In my primary school, top 3 students, I was one of them, Paul Samuels and Carla Franklin. The top students were black. We shouldn't be surprised. Professor Heidi Mistra carried out a study of what she called super performers. Not the blacks who failed, those who succeeded. And what did she find? In literally every area, black students were super performers. In business, in policing, 7 of the top police leaders in the Hall of Fame in America are black police leaders. Community policing, the concept, invented by a black police leader. You didn't know that, did you? Sports, well, we know black people are a $1 trillion asset in sports. We know that. Music and culture, hip-hop music is almost a $1 trillion industry of black artists. Jamaica, reggae music is the 3rd largest importer of foreign revenue in the country. Small island, big money because of their talent. So in every area, we have Africans in the diaspora who are super achievers. Tourism and leisure, the 3 largest public celebrations in the world are where? Brazil. The largest carnival in the world, invented by Africans in Brazil, it raises hundreds of millions. The 2nd largest celebration in the world is where? You know, Trinidad and Tobago, Caribbean. The third largest celebration in the world is it Notting Carnival, started by who? Caribbean people. So culturally we are rich. And people have learned how to monetize our culture. Next slide very quickly before they throw me off. I'll show you some pictures very quickly. That. Who is this individual? Nobel Prize winner. Who is this? Anybody can tell me? See? One of our greatest. Who is this man? Next slide, please. Professor Sir Arthur Lewis. Born St. Lucia 1915. Studied developmental economics. Received a Nobel Prize. Do you know what his subject was? How small and poor developing countries can be an economic power. Remember, some colonized countries are rich. The Congo is rich. Nigeria is rich. Ghana is rich. Tanzania is mineral rich. But many are not. And he developed a strategy for countries that don't have much resources to become powerful. Do you know his government marginalized him? They ignored him. That's a different story about about Caribbean and African governments, while all our best are employed by white people. Do you know what they did? The leaders of Singapore and South Korea took his ideas. Today, Singapore and South Korea is stronger than all Caribbean countries put together. Think about that. But the genius that was a Caribbean economist who his people didn't want to know. So think about this. Other people are becoming strong on our knowledge when our own leaders don't want to hear what we have to say. But other people will. I just came from UAE. They paid me well, they treat me well. Treat me better than most African leaders because they know what you have. The greatest Nigerians are not in Nigeria. They run in American institutions. Okay? Quickly. First millionaires in business in the UK from ethnic communities are not Indian, they're Caribbean. The first people honored from an ethnic community in the UK for their leadership in business is not Indians. They were black people, and here they are.
One nation, one Africa. Thank you, BlaXit family. Please keep watching and remember, follow your dreams.
Purchase your tracks today.
Emperor made this.